We ran everything. We paid off cops, we paid off lawyers, we paid off judges. Everybody had their hands out. Everything was for the taking. And now it's all over.
Henry was substantially responsible for bringing down the leadership of the Lucchese family, but Henry will never change. Henry is what is portrayed in the movie, a good fella.
To be a wise guy was better than to be president. Everything was business, everything was a hustle, everything was making money.
Henry was infamous. He was probably the most infamous rat.
My father had a lot of pride. He just couldn't get what my brother was doing. I have to say, he did break his heart.
You get a drink or two in him, he can become the most obnoxious human being on the planet. And when you get him sober, he's the sweetest guy I know.
In fact, I don't have any respect for him at all. Nonetheless, I'm fond of him. I can't explain why.
New York City in the 1940s seemed to have the biggest and best of everything in America. The #1 port, the busiest garment district, the best nightclubs, and of course, the most powerful mob families. The city was bustling with wartime activities when Carmela Hill brought her first son home from the hospital on June 11th, 1943. The housewife and her husband, Henry, an electrician at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, were overjoyed. They already had 4 girls, and now finally they had a boy. They named him Henry Jr.
When Henry was born, for the first time ever, according to my mother, my father sent her a dozen roses, but he didn't send them to her. He wrote the card to my son. He really was proud when he had this son.
Henry Boy, as they called him, joined his parents and 4 sisters in a 3-bedroom house in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn.
It was a warm neighborhood. It was people who were just getting out of the ghetto, people climbing through education, going to school and becoming somebody.
Henry's mother, Carmela, had come to America from Sicily at the age of 2 and was raised in an orphanage after her mother died. At 17, she met a hard-drinking 19-year-old Irishman named Henry Hill at a neighborhood dance. Henry was a union electrician who was supporting his mother and 2 younger brothers. Carmela felt an instant attraction. The young man was not only handsome, but clearly responsible.
She fell in love right away with him. I think they noticed each other right away and knew that they wanted to get married.
The couple exchanged wedding vows in 1929. They had 8 children by 1951, 5 girls and 3 boys, including Henry Jr. Carmela took great pride in her Sicilian cooking, and young Henry saw an angle for himself. He realized that by joining his mother in the kitchen, he could not only learn how to cook, but get some extra attention.
I'd be by his side and watch the cook. It was a house with 8 children, so, you know, you had to jockey for your love, you know, but I always got mine.
When he was young, very, very young, he was cute. He was a lot of fun. Had big ears that would flap out. By the time he was 8 or 9 years old, he was like a little gangster already. He really was. He would get into all kinds of mischief.
One of his favorite capers was to break into his father's toolbox and then leave the tools all over the backyard. Another was to sneak into the basement and drink his father's favorite peach brandy. Even as a child, Henry was always good at covering his tracks and letting someone else pay the price.
Probably I was a little more
Henry's brother Joe requested we not show his face.
I would always admit to my problem, and he'd always run from it and blame it on me. You know, I always got the blame for his screw-ups.
Henry not only let others take the fall for his mischief, but often enlisted their help. One day in 1953, 10-year-old Henry was pilfering change from subway grates. He brought along his younger brother Michael, who had spina bifida. A passerby saw Michael on crutches and gave him some money. For Henry, a new con was born.
Finally, one day, up from the subway comes my father. And he was ready to kill Henry. He wanted to kill him. He thought that was the worst thing in the world that he could have done.
He was always the blunt of my father's disappointment, not so much his anger. And I don't think it angered my dad so much as it disappointed him.
Henry Sr. didn't hesitate to take out his frustrations on his children, especially when he was drunk.
When he was sober, everything was fine. When he was drunk, it was, like an elephant in the house, stomping through the house.
I just stayed out of his way, and as long as I stayed out of his way, nothing happened. Henry was, I think, purposely antagonistic of him, and so therefore he was constantly challenging him.
The most serious challenge came in 1955 when Henry Jr. was 11 years old. He began hanging around a cab stand right across the street from his house, run by a man named Paul Vario. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that Vario was a capo, or middle manager, in the Lucchese mob family, one of the wealthiest in New York. Vario and the members of his mafia crew made no secret of their special status on the street.
They had power, absolute power, and money. That's a fatal combination. It's a great lure. And Henry was lured by it.
Paul Vario hired young Henry to wash and park cars for all the members of his crew.
I washed the car better than the car washers. They showed me once, and I made sure that I did it, correctly. I was getting a lot of approval from them that I wasn't getting at home.
My father didn't want him to work there at all because he knew who these people were, and he wanted all of us to stay away from them.
Henry ignored the warnings. He was drawn to the flamboyant mob lifestyle and began looking up to Paul Vario as a father figure. He was in awe of Paulie's money and power. The gangster looked out for him and told anyone who asked that Henry was a relative. Of course, Henry was only half Sicilian, so no matter how loyal he was, he could never become an official, full-fledged member of the mafia. Even so, Paulie's blessing gave Henry a unique status on the street.
Paul Vario was Henry Hill's mentor. Used to be Paulie's gopher. Go get me cigarettes, go get me this, go get me that. And Paulie apparently got to like him. Whatever he did, he could say, well, I'm working for Paulie. So basically, he had free run of the street.
Soon, school fell by the wayside, and the cab stand became Henry's full-time job. When Henry's